All right, everybody. Hi, and welcome to our discussion of glamour, dissipation of glamour. There's so much of it going around lately, and well, let's just say a lot of it is concentrated in that sixth-ray personality country, the United States. So I'll be dealing somewhat with that because it tends to set an example, good or bad now, for the world, and we'll be dealing with that as we move along. I'd just like to welcome those of you who are here right now. Alexandra, hi, and Annette, Ario, and Kara, Catherine, Ava, Heike, Jessica, Joan, and Johi, Karen, Kim, Leslie, Margot, Marianne, Mariana, let's see, where are we here? Yep. Mariut, Martha, and Martine, Miro, and Nienke, and Olivia, Risto, Suzanne, and Tia, and Ivan, and Zenaidi, and Veronica. Hi. And over here on the staff side, BL and Joe and Michael are keeping the ship on course, hopefully. And I just wanted to let you know that, did I let you know? I am working on a replacement video for this morning's video on cosmic fire, which had some technical mishaps. And that will be done shortly. At least the first half of what I'm redoing will be available to you before long, and then we'll be putting it up on YouTube. Okay, now our first work, we've come to a new section. We're on program 157, 97th reading, and we're sort of at the juncture here between page 160 and 161. So we're dealing with the ending of glamour in this big section. Basically, our segue is that if we do these things right, and we're learning the power of discrimination and distinction between intuition and desire, and between a number of the pairs of opposites. In this way, there might occur that stupendous recognition for which all initiation prepares the applicant, the revelation of the presence. And it is via the angel of the presence that we, as the disciple within the personality, the soul in incarnation, are introduced to the livingness of the presence. So that is, of course, our goal, and within that presence there will not be the power of glamour. And we have, as a group, to come in touch with the group angel, we, the group personality, coming in touch with the group angel that will help us, excuse me, dissipate the kind of kama monastic tendencies which stand in the way of the recognition of the presence. So let us, yeah, he wants us to absorb the the essentials, of course. and to adjust our human relations accordingly, our group relations. So here we are now with this ending of glamour. And let's see, could be, well, goodness, it's a lengthy section. It appears to be over 100 pages. So that's already taking us pretty well towards the end of this book. All right. So the ending of glamour. We come now to the consideration, and let me just get that out of the way. Yeah, one more. We come now to the consideration of the third section relating to world glamour. It is difficult to write clearly about this matter because we are in the midst of its most concentrated expression. Well, this was, what can I say? It was 70, 80 years ago. 80 years ago, probably 80 something. The worst the world has ever seen at that time, but we certainly are looking at a possible recrudescence of that glamorous situation as an attempt to thwart the effectiveness of the great conclave and the plans that it will impulse. So we're in the worst the world has ever seen. Let's assume that it's pretty bad now too. Incident to centuries of greed and selfishness, of aggression and materialism, and these have been focused in a triplicity of nations that we have called, as we go through here, the Axis. And that consisted of Germany foremostly, Japan, and Italy. Now, maybe the triangle of evil is differently located today. As a matter of fact, DK has said one point is in the United States and maybe in the New York area, or I don't know, New York or Washington, wherever. Another is in the Middle East, and a third in an unspecified location in Central Europe. I guess he has a reason for not defining what that is. This, it seems that the forces of materialism also need triangles through which to manifest. Now, whether that triangle has changed since the time of this writing, it's difficult to say. I would say that the United States and the Middle East are still very much members of this triangle. As for the third point, it has to be left up to debate and possible, justification. So anyway, it almost sounds like the worst aspects of the Earth signs, Taurus and Capricorn maybe particularly, greed, selfishness, aggression, and materialism. We have not had the great clarification of those signs. Capricorn, in which the best and the worst examples of humanity can be found, and Taurus, which is under the negativity of the selfish, instinctual nature. Virgo also can be very materialistic, but it carries so much of the second ray that maybe the materialism these days is somewhat offset, and the connection with the reappearing Christ is very strong. So, three nations express the three aspects of world glamour. He's looking at glamour in the large sense, and he's not discriminating between Maya glamour and illusion as he does elsewhere. They express the three aspects of world glamour in an amazing manner. And their powerful assault upon the consciousness of humanity is dependent not only upon the response of Germany, Japan, and Italy, namely glamour, Maya, and illusion, in that order. It is their powerful assault is dependent not only upon these three, to the ancient miasma, but also upon the fact that every nation, the United Nations, as he oftentimes called the Allies, United Nations as well as totalitarian nations, are tainted with this universal condition. Let's pause and think about that for just a moment. It's not like some nations are all good and others are all bad. As a matter of fact, right now we have the reawakening of fascism and even Nazism, which takes it a step further in some of the nations which were powerful on the side of good during the Great War. It doesn't take much, really, because the selfish condition which produces glamour and lets in the influence of these forces of materialism is close to the surface. And we discover accordingly that it is the lodge of materialism which is generally able to make the first impact. And then, of course, slowly the forces of light, as represented by humanity, then awaken to what is happening. But I think never fast enough, and it's happening that way now. Never fast enough. So the freedom of the world, now notice, how this is related to the lords of liberation. One of the lords has to do with liberty, The freedom of the world is consequently largely dependent upon those people in every nation who, within themselves, have moved forward out of one or other of these glamorous illusions and myopic impressions of the human soul into a state of awareness where they can see the conflict in wider terms. That is, as that existing for them between the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence. Now, hopefully, there are enough of these people. We will soon see. Because there's no question, in terms of an object lesson, in this significant election that is forthcoming, that the soul of the nation on the second ray is being pitted against a kind of selfish fanaticism and idealism of a narrow kind, which can emerge on the sixth ray. I'm not saying it always does, because there are many wonderful sixth ray souls, but it can, and is a last eruption or vestige of the outgoing sixth ray, and so it is peculiarly acute and dangerous. Matter of fact, he did say that the sixth ray is much more destructive than the first ray. There are certain values and principles to be upheld, and the first ray knows how to do it. Sixth ray people, generally younger in their soul nature, less experience, more easily swept by emotion and by very concrete idealism of a narrow kind, and they just don't yet have the perspective. They don't have the wisdom, and they are going out of incarnation, which is an internal threat to them. They may not know where that feeling of being threatened comes from, but deep down they know that as souls they are being abstracted into other states, and it will be a while before those on that soul ray reappear in great numbers, significant numbers. And they incidentally, they will, says the Tibetan, have difficulty during the seventh ray age, because those two rays are so contrasted. Sometimes people on the sixth ray acquire the seventh ray personality for a number of lives in order to help them work more harmoniously with those two very contrasting rays, and especially from the monadic aspect. So anyway, these people are the aspirants, disciples, and initiates of the world. And I assume among them we number ourselves, at least as those who aspire to a higher state and point of tension. They are aware of the dualism, the essential dualism of the conflict, and are not so preeminently conscious of the threefold nature and the differentiated condition of the situation which underlies the realized dualism. It's like, let's say, the awareness of the three merges into a stronger awareness of conflicting dualities. This because the soul and personality are merging and becoming united. And hopefully, this is the case for all of us. I mean, we really must, if we study the Tibetan, meditate accordingly, and serve along the lines that he has indicated, we will find ourselves numbered here among these people who are on the side of the good, and in their own way and without fully understanding, are attempting to carry forward the will to good. Their approach to the problem is therefore simpler. They don't have to deal with monad soul personality. They don't have to deal with the triplicity. And because of this, world direction lies largely in their hands at this time. It's this conflict between good and evil, between our better angels, as Lincoln said, which probably sums up to the angel of the presence, and our lesser selves, our personalities from which we are to remove our gaze. Take your eyes off the little personal self, DK is always telling us. It is right here that religion has, as a whole, gone astray. He's not just singling out only one religion, I guess. I refer to Orthodox religion. That is a religion which has grown up dogmatically incorporating many misinterpretations, many even outright forgeries, as Blavatsky said, many things hidden. And when it comes to Christianity and Islam, Scorpio is very prominent in both of them. DK says Christianity is a scorpionic religion, and when you look at the role that death and conquest and so forth play in Islam, or at least have over the centuries, I'm not speaking of the Sufis now, the scorpionic trend is there. And of course, Scorpio, in a higher sense, is the sign of humanity as a whole. But we have yet to live up to that higher Scorpio, which puts the ninefold Hydra into a state of incapacitation. The Hydra expires on the scorpionic plane of intuition. But as a race, we're not there yet. So here religion has gone astray, Orthodox religion. It has been preoccupied with the dweller on the threshold and, with the dead Christ also, not with the living, present Son of the Father, as we all are. Son of the Father, Mother, as we all are. It has been preoccupied with the dweller on the threshold, talking always about original sin and how we are born in sin and how we need the priestcraft to intermediate between ourselves and the redemptive factor. Now, the Protestant Reformation went some ways to eliminate that middle factor, which subjected people to so much selfish manipulation. But again, we're not there yet. The eyes of the theologian have been held upon the material, phenomenal aspect of life through fear and its immediacy. When you want to control people, and the Lodge of Materialism knows this, you make them afraid, then you make them chaotic, then you submit them to drugs and other consciousness-killing substances. You induce disorder, instinctual disorder in their life. So he tells us that the eyes of the theologian, in a way, have not been really focused on the kingdom of God, because you have to wait for that until you're dead, then you go to heaven or paradise or whatever. Not understanding that the kingdom of heaven is the fifth kingdom right here on this physical plane, with people expressing their souls and not just their personalities. So this is where theological thinking has directed us through fear, and the fact of the angel which is hardly even known in these groups, has been a theory and a point of wishful thinking. So, by and large, people don't believe that the angel exists. And they don't know the constitution of man. And it's so important that those who are ready for this next step learn about the constitution of man and about their own next step. Because, these religions have not been, except among certain practitioners, expressions of a true loving humanitarianism. Now he says the balance is being adjusted by the humanitarian attitudes, which are so largely coming into control, irrespective of any theological trend. And this is why, we might say, why so many are abandoning Orthodox religion. Except the real, diehards who are filled with fear regarding their post-mortem state and eternity in hell. Not a very appealing prospect. Of course, it's irrational, it's illogical, but you won't get very far trying to explain that. These attitudes take their stand upon these better attitudes, right? Take their stand upon the belief of the innate rightness of the human spirit, not the born in sin idea and the abject unworthiness, lowliness of man, not that, but rather the belief in the innate rightness of the human spirit, in the divinity of man, and upon the indestructible nature of the soul of mankind. So these are the proper attitudes, and obviously as students of esotericism, we try to exemplify these attitudes in our belief, our speech, our life, our service. This inevitably brings in the concept of the presence, or of God immanent. That's interesting, the equation of the two, equality of the two. The presence is immanent in every emanation. I almost don't want to use the word creature or creation because, in my view anyway, God, the universal logos, created out of itself through the process of emanation, which means that the essence of God, or the great being of the universe, there's also transcendental considerations there beyond the universe, but let's forget them for the moment. The essence of that great deity is found in everything. And actually, all these emanations, good or bad at the moment, are aspects of the great emanator. I'd rather call this great being the great emanator than the great creator. But the word would not be as popular, I think. So this inevitably brings in the concept of the presence, or of God immanent, and is the result of the needed revolt against the belief of God transcendent? Well, I guess we can have both, but it tends to crush the human being when he thinks that there is no inherency of God within him. Okay, this spiritual revolution, I mean, you can think of Martin Luther as an initiate. And by the way, a Scorpio, again, that's great for transforming, right? A first-ray scorpionic individual with Leo as his rising sign. I forget what was the moon sign, but an interesting horoscope with lots of power down there at the fourth house, where you're making an entirely new basis for things. In his particular case, a protest, a protestant, a rebellion, a revolt against the crushing presentation of God transcendent, only transcendent. So this spiritual revolution, still going on powerfully, was entirely a balancing process and need, process and need cause no, I'm sorry, and need cause no basic concern. For God transcendent eternally exists, but can only be seen and known and correctly approached by God immanent in individual man. You know, that means inherently within, inseparable from what you are, in you, just like a higher power is not only beyond you, it's in you at the same time, the higher power. So God immanent is that great higher power as within the person. And the transcendent aspect is approached by God immanent in the individual man, in groups, soul of the group, in nations, soul of the nations, in organized forms and in religion, in humanity as a whole, and in the planetary life itself. So that's very, what should we say about that? Very encouraging, despite the blindness of those who are still in the very selfish stage. Humanity is today and has been for ages battling illusion, glamour, and Maya, all sort of under the big heading of glamour. But even, sometimes the big heading of illusion and Maya. All of these words are specific and all of them are general as well. Advanced thinkers, maybe they're not quite upon the probationary path. Those upon the probationary path, upon the path of discipleship and the path of initiation, have reached the point where materialism and spirituality, the dweller on the threshold and the angel of the presence, and the basic dualism of manifestation can be seen clearly. We're in a scorpionic phase of a great planetary battle. And we have to remember that Scorpio is the fighter. And the conflict between the dualities is found in that sign. In Gemini, it's the interplay of the dualities, but in Scorpio, it's the conflict, and you can see that over here, if I can just kind of find it. I'm going to pull it in from over here. It's a little easier to work with this instead of Zoom in some respects, but not in all. So page 333, and here we go. Scorpio conflict with duality, the fighter. So that's humanity now, and has been for a long time. And what we have here eventually is we will achieve on the Buddhic plane a higher unity. So I'll just put this here, if I can, in red. And it reminds us of where we are, we human beings, at this time, fighting it out, and hopefully the angel which we are will prevail over the dweller which we are. Okay, that's a different program. All right. Because of this clarity, it's clearer now than it was in Arjuna's days on the field of Kurukshetra. It's clearer because Scorpio has that kind of penetrating, discriminative ability under Mercury. Because of this clarity of demarcation, the issues underlying the present world events, the objectives of the present worldwide struggle, it's not over yet, the modes and methods of reestablishing the spiritual contact so prevalent in Atlantean days and so long lost, and the recognition of the techniques which can bring in the New World era and its cultural order can be clearly noted and appraised. So that's as far, in other words, the issues are now clear, much clearer than in the days when Arjuna could not make up his mind, really. The issues were not clear to him at the time. And he needed really the guidance of Krishna, the charioteer, and in a certain sense, his own soul, to throw his weight in the battle upon the side of the good. And, I've been meaning to, my friend Philip Lindsay has told me about is it a Peter Brooks film? And is it 9 hours long? Something like that? About the Mahabharata? And about that great battle. I've been meaning to take a look at that film, because probably historically it's one of the most vivid representations we're going to have. So we've done a couple of pages up till 163, I think, and we're almost, where are we here? Okay, yeah, I think we're on page 163. So going back here, this is understandable, this kind of writing that the Tibetan is doing here. No one is guilt-free at all. And so we have to undertake our responsibility properly in order to help humanity pass through a very perilous passage. And hopefully, we will succeed. There will be, for all of us, suffering along the way. So today is the 4th of September, and we're program reading number 97, and we're ending on page 163, and we're beginning then, I suppose, on the 11th of September, that day, September 11th. and it will be program 158, and it will be the 98th reading. And yes, we'll just put that down as 163. All right. And then we'll be taking up Germany, the United Nations, some of the specifics. Now, these countries have changed their approach. We might say that the soul of these particular nations is emerging more clearly. Germany has a fourth ray soul. In a way, it's very different from its first ray Piscean personality. And Japan has a fourth ray soul with the sixth ray personality, and Italy has the sixth ray soul with the fourth ray personality. Now, hopefully, when you look at all those sixes and fours, plus the ray 1 personality of Germany, you will find the two rays, 6 and 4, which are prominent on the path of probation. Path of aspiration, probation, rays 6 and 4. Path of discipleship, especially accepted discipleship, rays 3 and 5. And the path of initiation, rays 1 and 7. Those are the main rulers, with the second ray somehow absorbing all of them as the major synthetic ray. So before we get into our meditation, we can have your questions, your thoughts, your observations. The issue is clear. Humanity has a great choice at the present time, and opportunity is as never before. Humanity has to learn God immanent and is learning. And there are people who basically are transcending the orthodoxy of the concrete mind, which can be such a blockage to real spirituality, and more of them are getting rid of the dogmatism of the church and the new church, because the church will not fade out, it will transform, will be based on spiritual science and on the great principle of invocation and evocation. So these are some of the good signs that humanitarianism is coming into effect. And we're learning how to, like Arjuna, we're learning how to throw our weight as a group, as within humanity, upon the side of the angel of the presence, which eventually will reveal to us the presence itself. There's some wonderful stanzas. I've made some verbal commentaries on them, I think, from Esoteric Psychology 2. It's about the angel of the presence, and when that angel really starts to take over, different in the case of every ray. And it's pretty much a third initiation thing as we anticipate the angel's involvement at that time. And it's on Makara, and maybe it will be of use to you to review those commentaries if you have not already done so. Basically, none of us is guilt-free here. All of us still have responsibilities to carry out which we have not yet carried out, and it will take every one of us in order to offset the militant attitude, the warring militant attitude of the forces of materialism against the opportunities now being offered to humanity. Okay, your thoughts, questions, comments, whatever you want to bring up. And if you would field those members of our team, I would be appreciative. Okay, thank you, BL. BL has just put where the angel of the present commentaries
Olivia,
can be found.
I'm sorry, Olivia has her hand up.
Okay, Olivia has her hand up. Let me get to you here, Olivia. Okay, and there we go. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You know, I think we're fortunate in our glamour work that it really helps us increase our ability of discrimination and how truth's distorted and lies take place. And as we've been saying, you know, the field of politics is where we see this the most. Well, also, as you were saying, U.S. politics are at a crisis point with the upcoming presidential election. And now there's another factor, a potential factor, as the race heats up that I think we need to consider, and that is violence. You know, there's radical and violent supporters of President Trump. There's President Putin, who cares about this race and has just poisoned another one of his opponents. And this could potentially lead to violent action.
Yeah.
You know, as a serious precaution, I see the real need to protect the safety of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from harm.
Yes.
And I also see a need to protect the democracy of the United States from harm, because authoritarianism is in danger of taking over democracy.
Yeah.
I also think we want no one harmed, including President Trump. So this is not a political statement.
Mm-hmm.
However, it seems that Joe Biden and the democracy of the United States are in most potential danger. You know, so I would say to our group, if this speaks to you, to please add Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the democracy of the United States to your daily prayers of protection for the highest good. You know, this is an important precaution. We know in our history things have happened that we never want to have happen again. So this is just a precaution, but it is a precaution for the highest good at this very, very important time of crisis.
Yeah, I think those are excellent suggestions. I know for myself, you know, speaking of the angel of the presence, every day I see those two in the protective downflow from the angel in their own particular cases, and I the power of visualization can be very strong. So I think we can bring that to bear at this crucial point, because, you know, we've been told fascism is latent. Well, it's certainly latent in humanity, but it's latent in the United States, and I wouldn't be surprised if many unsatisfied fascists and Nazis have been reincarnated in the States as part of the demise of the Piscean civilization. And this is kind of a fight to the last ditch. So let us consecrate our creative imaginations very powerfully. That's in a sense, that's what we're doing even with these glamour meditations, and make it, even for a few minutes a day, a daily fact in our interior life. This democracy represents hierarchy. monarchy is Shambhala and communism, socialism is man-made, but democracy, or the Republican form of government, which is democratic, is fighting some very heavy enemies right now, and they are autocratic, and they believe in the centralization of power in their own hands. They are deficient in the second ray. And internally, we have to do our best to counteract that in this last 2 months, where a new type of civil war could erupt and martial law could be declared. And if it is declared, then anything is possible when people are fearful during a proclaimed emergency. So we have a big responsibility, and your suggestions, yes, are exactly on target, and we have to fulfill inwardly those factors. You'll see what we're going to meditate on today, and obviously one is aware of this. I must say now, I don't feel tonight all peaches and cream. I read about the criticism of dead soldiers as losers and suckers by our coward in chief. And I'm sure that with many in the nation and around the world, they share my outrage at this absolutely reprehensible statement directed from the unworthy towards those who have given the last full measure of devotion, as Lincoln said. So everything is upside down in that respect, and whether wars are justified or unjustified, you have to take things up, and so many of them are unjustified, but that's not the point. In the mind of these people who went into combat, they were doing something selfless for their nation. And to be called losers and suckers because they died, even back World War I, there was a big battle that prevented the Germans of the time from reaching Paris, and many died, 1,800, something like that, 1,800. To think of those people being denigrated in this way is outrageous. And I hope that the fire of indignation seizes hold of the military so that their sacrifices, and there are many, these military families, they sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Right.
not
And
justified.
right. And for someone to have no concept of the value of sacrifice and service, and have no concept of empathy either, is really a very telling point of the quality of this person.
It's really hard to evade it, to avoid it. The Tibetan began in 1935-36, basically saying, look, don't criticize anybody. This was the hope that the new invocation at the time, the goodwill invocation, and the basic flowering of goodwill in the mid-30s and all that could do something. By the time he was writing later in the 40s, it was Hitler and his evil gang. So we have to look at where we examine the writing, what years are involved. The forces of materialism are behind this callous disregard. It's almost unbelievable, just unbelievable. So we have to counter that. Tuya was saying she's right. wherever we can express the love energy, we express it, but with firmness in terms of the principles of sacrifice, which, I want to say when you're opening the fifth petal, which is ruled by Leo and Scorpio, and is sort of a midway point of decision having to do with Libra, it's a very difficult situation. And from the utmost selfishness comes the tarot's fall from the tower, the blasted tower. And out of these towers, the culprits fall and are destroyed in terms of their tendencies, and then have to reorient themselves entirely. We're almost at the point when they are ready to fall from the tower. It's a tough one. All of us have fallen from the tower, I guess, because selfishness is an aspect of growth, and you can't help it. Along the way, somewhere in thousands of lives, there will be some lives which are very self-obsessed. But now I think we see better, and we see that those who are selfish must fall. It's just a question of how it will happen, and we know that we have to encourage the right kind of voting and stalwart protectiveness if we can do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. And I'm sure, look, I know we're talking about the United States, okay, but this can be a problem everywhere. This nativism can rise everywhere, and in some countries is rising, and it has to be stopped. Okay.
Okay, Michael.
Yes.
There's a follow-on here from Tia to what Olivia was saying, and Tia says, I would also add that the pairing of Joe and, I'm sorry, how does she say it? Kamala.
Yeah.
Kamala.
Okay, that must also be protected. The pairing must be maintained.
I know they'll try to separate one from the other, but I do believe they have a winning combination. And she's such a bright light, my God. When you look at her, and so smart and so representative of two different large cultures.
And not afraid.
No, not afraid. That's the point. There's the first ray there. So it's been a great choice. Now, obviously, I know we're not supposed to be political here, but it's just
Michael, that boat has sailed with some of your comments.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
I said that boat has sailed with some of your comments.
Yes. Yes. I'm afraid so. I was just outraged. I don't get angry very often, but to criticize fallen soldiers, my God.
Oh. Yes, I'm from a military family. I was as well.
Yeah, I know, BL, you are from the military, so this strikes close to home.
Yeah, and Tia adds also on this particular subject that he is outraged because he has not been able to use the military politically as he wanted.
Yeah.
The forces of light have maintained control of the military.
That's a very good point. Very good point. And I'm so, it's almost, there's no time to breathe a sigh of relief. But somehow, when I look at that situation as you're describing it, I have a certain sense, well, at least there's no knee-jerk reaction in the military. They are thinking, And anybody that insults them that way, yes, dear? Yes?
Well, sorry.
Speaking of the first ray, go ahead.
I wanted to add something beautiful now about Kamala. Kamala means lotus.
Kamala.
Kamala.
Yes, Kamala means lotus, and
Yes.
I think it is beautiful to imagine that way, that like that. How would I put that into words? I have been studying, as you all have been studying this situation, how they are all the time developing, and somehow one is expecting that, okay, now it has been enough. But then the next day comes, and again, even more deep insults are brought in. And I was once saying already, but now when I have been looking, I really think, hopefully I'm wrong, but I am really thinking that there is cosmic evil involved.
Mhm.
And this is, if one is thinking that way, we know that there are the forces of darkness. We see that, but if there is now, again, the fourth time in human history that the cosmic evil is involved. And why do I say that is that I was seeing one documentary just some months ago, and it was telling about the youth of Hitler. And these people were describing that they didn't understand what was going over them. One woman was describing that it was like one day that the veil was lifted from us, and we were just thinking what got into us. And we know that cosmic evil was then affecting. And then there was coming one documentary upon those areas where the Trump is very powerful, and these people are almost in same words telling how this woman was describing when they were involved in this some kind of like collective thought form. So, and now these people, how they are acting, it looks like that they are not thinking like a normal people are thinking. So that there is something affecting. So my question honestly is that is there now a cosmic evil trying to get involved into the things of humankind? Because America is always the one which is affecting globally, and this is a global phenomenon. It is affecting into so many places and into such a way that the selfish part is released again, and it is given permission to be reacted like that. And that is this bigger and the more horrible possibility, if that is the case. I cannot say is it so, but the more I am looking, and then one aspect of that, what Michael was telling about, of this thing that normally it is so that people are not insulting any more people who have died. And when you start to insult people who have passed, then you go over some kind of unwritten law, how we should be looking those souls. So, and now we have only a few months left, then we have only a few years left before the conclave. So there must be a huge battle at the moment going on, and where the scale is going to be tilting. So that's why I think that for us it is so very important that we are able to increase love in our own lives, that we can emphasize it in much stronger and deeper ways.
Thank you.
Yes, and we also need that protection. You know, we know that this is evil, and we are in a battle, and so we really have to stand up for what is right, and do this as a precautionary way of providing the protection so that true democracy can go forward. So I think we all agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think, and of course, and he gives us a protective formula every time we engage in this particular meditation. And I say, fail to use it at your peril. I mean, he's given it to us, and we have to respect that. I would just like to say, I do believe, see, planetary evil is based on ignorance. Cosmic evil is based on deliberate choice of a retrogressive path. I think cosmic evil is involved because the door where evil dwells was not entirely sealed at the end of the Second World War. So I think that it is as bad as you suggest, and it is sweeping along with it planetary evil, which is just based on the lack of experience that younger souls may have, depending on when they were individualized and so forth. But the two together, that's exactly what happened in Germany. It was what Master Moria calls an epidemic of obsession. That's what he calls it. Starting writing from the 20s when all of this was really being activated, an epidemic of obsession. And we see the possibility when we look into the eyes of the people at these rallies who are just, as they stare into space and repeat what has been said, you see obsession at work, mass obsession, group obsession. So we have to be possessed by the powers of the light and work as hard as we can the next number of years to offset this. Okay, there's a few more hands here, and I don't want to go on.
Michael?
Yes.
Yeah, there's three hands up. Yvonne was first, then Tia, then Alexandra. But you also have a couple of more comments here.
Okay.
Karen, we made it to Karen Gritska. She says the silence of many allows for evil. And I hope the military leaders speak out as a group.
Yeah, I was so thrilled by this. What is it, former general or admiral or whatever he was, His father was killed in Vietnam, and he rose to the occasion with that public letter. Yeah. So, and there's a special quote, Karen, I can't remember exactly what it is. It's like all that it takes for evil to prevail is that enough people remain silent, something of that nature. And then there's many dramatic things. I was silent when they came for the Jews. I was silent when they came for the gypsies. Whatever. And it goes on. I was silent when they came for the churchmen, etc., etc. And then they came from me, and there was no one to speak on my behalf. Something like that. So yes, in our thought, we cannot be silent. And in our conversation, we cannot be silent in the face of obvious fascistic neo-Nazi evil. Anything else there, Karen? That's it?
Okay, and then Joe says, I pray for clarity. I live at ground zero in the Portland metropolis. I also spent 20 years in politics. Yesterday in group meditation, it felt that we all must devote our energies to helping with the current crisis.
I'm sure we all will agree on that point. And then it remains to be done, of course. And some groups are persistently doing it, and we just have to persist in this matter. Okay? What else?
And Heike says, for my parents, I know that in Germany, it was like a spell over the people. And after the war, like awakening and not understanding how they couldn't have seen what really was going on. It was a shock, which we still have to work out of our system in Germany. I think that happens again. Some people can't see it in the US, but many more can than in Germany.
Yeah, the example was set, and the magical powers of a negative kind were released. When you look at those Nuremberg rallies of the early 30s, middle 30s, it was designed to hypnotize. And the Piscean personality of Germany, with its first ray, but especially the Pisces, says the Tibetan, made that great nation of artists and poets and, musicians, it made it extremely vulnerable. And apparently this all came in toward the end of the 19th century with Bismarck, who was born just at the same time Lincoln was, within a couple of years apart, a few years apart, and was the counterbalance, the negative counterbalance to what Lincoln was in terms of human avatar. One represented the Lodge of Blood and Iron, Mars, obviously, and the other represented the light and humanitarianism. So yes, a spell, indeed, a spell. And as stated, here comes the COVID disease, here comes the epidemic, and those big rallies, almost, they don't have the same kind of pageantry as the Nuremberg rallies, but they have something of a hypnotic nature, and now they cannot be held. Very interestingly, they're much reduced in scale. The power that could be generated by them is reduced. You begin to wonder about the timing of the pandemic. Thank you, Heike.
Okay, and Yvonne has had her hand up for quite a while. So Yvonne, go ahead, please.
Okay, I wanted to tell you, Michael, that last night and this morning, Trump on CNN News or on the news vehemently denied that he said that. He said only an animal would say something like that. It was that guy at the reporter at the Atlantic that's wrong. I probably fired him from somewhere else because said I would never say anything like that. I just wanted to tell you he's denying.
Yeah, I know there's denial, and there were 4 witnesses or something like that. Look, we can't subject that man to the usual standards of lying and truth telling. It's gone. It's hopeless. There's no more way to say, well, he and those around him wouldn't have lied. We cannot do that. We just unfortunately, very unfortunately, have to assume that whatever will get him reelected and do permanent damage to humanity, I think, will be attempted. So thank you for that. Yeah, I've read about these denials, and of course, you either believe him or you don't. That's it. Thanks, Yvonne. Anything else there that you want to say? Sorry.
Okay, and Alexandra, go ahead, Alex. You're self-muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you bet.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, hi, I have a comment and then a question. Yeah, first of all, following what Tuya said about cosmic evil, in common parlance, we say that they drank the Kool-Aid. That comes from the Moonies, doesn't it? And that's, it's a way of kind of explaining it to people when they say, how can people, support this and say these things and do these things? And yeah, you do have to think in terms of it is something which is beyond our ordinary comprehension. What I wanted to say, and also in the book Appeasing Hitler, which I've mentioned many times, there were many people in European countries and American countries who supported Hitler, actually thought he was a good guy, and were actually blinded to what was coming. And you know, they thought Churchill was crazy when he was, before he was prime minister, and he was saying we have to arm against this evil. So in a way, it is history repeating itself. Now, as far as the vessel or the puppet which these evil forces choose to use for this purpose, if you read Mary Trump's book, Mary Trump is a PhD in clinical psychology, and I was astounded. We're speaking about the bar going lower and lower, and we're being astounded by what he says and he does. When you read even just a few pages of this clinical study, it was jaw-dropping for me, because even I had, as she says, narcissist is a very mild term to use. The extent of the dysfunction and the damage and the cruelty in which this man was brought up, and it goes back through his father and his grandfather, and the neglect, the lack of a mother figure, and the racism, the bigotry, the corruption, and sadistic cruelty that was just born in him from an early age helps to explain, you know, and almost reduces the outrage, because we're sort of looking at it from our consciousness and our level of evolution. But when you look at this in context of a damaged soul, this is not making any excuses, a damaged soul from so way back, and so damaged that we can't even conceive of it. It is quite illuminating to read this book. I'm really glad that I've seen it. Now I have my question, which is this. So we're all, you know, it's almost like 4 years has flown by, and I'm getting flashbacks from 4 years ago. And once again, we're all working our socks off to, you know, pray, meditate, help get the vote out in a very practical way, biting our fingernails until that night where we hope everything goes in and is counted correctly, and maybe that won't happen at all. My question is this, and I've actually asked this to Nicholas 4 years ago while he was giving a talk, and I actually can't remember what his answer was. So I'm asking it again to you, Michael, which is, what are, in fact, the factors which will determine how this election comes out? Esoterically and practically, but esoterically, what are the factors? Because we're all doing something, and we're all hoping something. But stepping back from the a larger view,
Yep.
What will determine?
First of all, I can't answer that. Second of all, when I do answer, I'm going to say a simple sentence. The courage and sacrifice of those upon the second ray will determine, and I mean, second ray in the general sense, representing the second aspect, the soul. The overcoming of weakness and sensitivity to stand with courage and sacrifice beyond the normal will determine the outcome. I'm just going to leave it at that.
The people on the second ray?
No.
Having courage?
Well, no, you see.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
No, not exactly. The second ray is the generic soul ray of the nation, and many people respond to it. Those who respond to that soul of the nation on the second ray with the humanitarian sign Aquarius will determine, through the courage they do not always show and the sacrifice that they may be afraid to show, how this goes. And everyone will have to work out internally and by himself or herself how that courage and sacrifice will manifest. It can manifest in many, many different ways, but it will be called for. And of course, you know, the degree to which Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can be used by that second ray energy to really represent the hierarchy and the Christ. They may not know those particular terms, but the degree to which they are courageous and sacrificial. And they both show good signs of that. One other factor is how many stupid, abhorrent things can be done by the selfishly inclined to wake up those who are on the borderline of renouncing the cruelty and selfishness. There are a number of factors, but they do center, in my view, around courage and selflessness, courage and sacrifice, and the willingness or unwillingness to abide by a courageous reaction and a selfless sacrificial reaction. It's a test for everybody. I'm not going to get
So
into
it's individual
the
courage.
astrology of it.
So it's individual courage.
Well, no, not
It's
only,
individual courage.
not. Yes, it is that group
Yeah.
courage, national
Yeah.
courage. You know, it. I was
Okay.
just reading the other day of the 5 prerequisites regarding the reappearance of the Christ, and the very first one is courage. Very first one that the Tibetan mentions. It's in the book, and he names it right off to start the whole process, and the others follow after. Courage. That's now.
Thank you.
Let it be worked
Thank
out
you.
internally. Let everyone take the responsibility of finding the way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
yeah.
And Tia has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tia, yourself. There you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a sort of a follow-up to what you said, Michael, that I think that this time is a time of tremendous opportunity. I think that all of the people, a lot of the people who go into politics have very good intentions, but they have to withstand a lot of temptation and onslaughts that happen so many times throughout the day, the weeks, the months, the minutes. And I do pray for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to maintain their strength and to be courageous. But I think that the one thing that I can say about the last 4 years is that a lot of things that were sort of hidden or discounted, that was sort of the ugly side of America and the ugly side of ourselves, we've had to examine.
Yeah.
And now the question is that you've seen it, and you've seen it in the most grotesque way, because sometimes we need to have it at that level to really be able to own it and identify it within ourselves. We may not be to that degree, but I think all of us may be carriers of that in that way. And so when you see it, what are you going to do about it is the question.
Yeah.
And that's for all of us, not just for Donald Trump. He has put a good light on aspects of America that have been in existence for a very long time. You know, I think about the misogynistic statements that he made. I mean, that just that he and the behaviors that he engaged in. I am still trying to understand how he got elected after all of that. But people were willing to turn the other way because he seemed to espouse some of their special interest. But you know, if you're willing to do that and make that compromise, you have to ask yourself, why would you be surprised that we find ourselves here right now?
Well stated, everything. And it's Pluto, you know. Pluto is very interesting. And with Vulcan, the spiritual will, it comes before the reappearance of the Christ. And we're in that period when everything is being dragged to the surface. So he's a good dragger, and he's focusing the very unacceptable side of the American psyche, of so many Americans. So it's a Plutonic examination. When you see a psychologist like Mary Trump come out and make a very popular book, we know we're into the realm of Pluto, which reveals everything and demands its healing, and then has to enter the spiritual will of Vulcan, the will of the soul, which says enough and we will not abide this. And that's where the courage will enter. And we will have to realize that we have done a lot of projecting in the psychological sense and imagined that the other guy is the bad guy. I was just reading, well, I don't want to get into it. The stories are too many. You know, when you go through a battlefield in the First World War that prevented the Germans from overrunning Paris in that war, and you ask, hey, who were the good guys in this war? Then it's a hint about who's using you. So we have to face the ugly side of our own nature. And that is being done in a dramatic way. The whole police brutality thing, I think, was never accented. Always there, but never accented the way it is now. And the hidden judgments and prejudices and put downs, you know, of other groups. You know, this is no longer white, masculine America. It's not going to be. And the future of America and of the whole human race is not that. He tells us what the human race will be like during the sixth root race that lasts 10 million years. And it's nothing like the guys that are trying to preserve the white man's privilege, especially the man in them. It's all going to go in a different direction. And this is the beginning of the friction, even the war, to take privilege away from a small and relatively selfish group at this time and distribute it more widely. Well, you know, there's so many things we could say, but we're getting an eyeful of where we have been and what's been hidden in our own aura, individually, nationally, and internationally within the whole of humanity. It's interesting times. What do the Chinese say? That may you live in interesting times. And we are certainly doing that. So thank you, Tia, for your thoughts.
Suzanne says, I feel it of utmost importance to continue to encourage all whom we are in contact with to continue to absolve from the temptation to anger, criticism, and defeatism in every act, thought, and reaction we experience. These small things over a large audience participation will change energies.
Yes, there's much to what you say, of course, and the principle of synthetic, you know, love is the main thing. That's what the Christ brings. There are, however, some first-ray moments along the way, and they are, you know, Ataturk moments and Zhukov moments, and you know, the people who abolitionist moments, the courageous women who fought that, and there are moments in the British Parliament where A man by the name of William Wilberforce had to apply the first ray. There are those moments, I can't even name people from Master Moria's ashram. There are Nelson Mandela moments. He had a great skill in doing both, synthesis and love simultaneously, but no question that we must identify what is connected with the lodge of materialism. And what is he, he has some choice words there, these lords of wicked pride and hateful lusts, he calls them, or do I reverse it? Hateful pride and wicked lust. It's something like that, and we have to stand in spiritual being. So with a combination of the first ray and the second ray, principally, we will succeed. Never too overpowering, never too weak. Both together, standing for love and will. Then we will succeed. Thank you, Suzanne.
And then Alex has her hand up again.
Great.
Alex, did you want to say something else? You're self-muted.
Are you talking to me, Bill?
There you are.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I didn't have my hand up again.
Okay.
I didn't. I don't think so. Thank you so much.
BL is vigilant. Okay, so if we press the button, she is there. Okay, friends, is that it then for the moment? Because we have a meditation to do.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you all for your thoughts. There is a crisis. I think Olivia said that right off the bat. There is this crisis, and it turns out it's going to be a world human-wide crisis between the dweller and the angel all over again. It's kind of like the third or psychological phase of it, and it's happening now. There was the Battle of Kurukshetra. There was the Great War, 1914 to 1945. And now there is the question of a great decision to be made regarding democracy and the will of human beings everywhere versus the will to control them coming from deliberately evil anti-plan forces. This is kind of a third phase. And we know that for the sake of humanity as a whole, the will to good, even though we don't completely understand what it is, but, enough, the will to good must prevail. Must prevail. Okay. So we'll, we'll call this glamour pathological selfishness. It may come from psychological damage, from an acute inability to understand one's own true nature. It can come from cowardice, the refusal to face oneself and to realize what one has become, but it is there. And it is a human condition that leads to psychological, it already is a psychological disease. It's not that it has to lead there, but it just worsens the, what do they call it? Those comorbidities, psychological comorbidities underlying the general functioning of the psyche. So we know what we're facing. It is a disease, and it can, and a huge glamour. Of course, glamours like this, excuse me, are primarily along the first ray line in the field right now of politics, primarily. And, you know, it can be spread more widely, of course, but this is where the danger lies at the present time. The lords of materialism are mostly first-ray souls, says the Tibetan, or they have the first ray as their principal sub-ray of the soul, and they are principally manipulative third-ray monads. They are not exactly what you would call the failures of the previous solar system. In a way, they are much worse, because they are the success of the wrong tendencies in the previous solar system. And they don't want to give up their prerogatives, and they're very intelligent, very skillful. So a combination of the third ray and the first ray, when the second ray in its higher aspect is missing, is a very lethal combination, lethal regarding the welfare of human consciousness and, of course, just normal human living. Once the consciousness goes, then everything starts to fall apart. But wherever there is a withering of the law and an uprising of lawlessness on all sides, then I manifest myself from age to age for the salvation of such as do good and the destruction of those who do evil. I think it's the Bhagavad Gita. I think it's Krishna speaking, and it's the Christ speaking, and it is found by DK in 5 or 6 references throughout his books. But we are living now at a time of the withering of the law. We see it. And it will proceed, but it can also be exposed. And people who are fighting between the soul and personality within themselves, they can block its worst effects. And that we, as students of esotericism, we find we must counterbalance the worst effects of the withering of the law. Okay, so let's go on with our work. And we won't name everybody again, but there are some almost 40 of us here, and we think of ourselves as a group committed in our soul nature to work with each other to restore health to the subtle worlds, especially the world of emotional living, where so many people are vulnerable to demagogues and those who speak to the glamours and the illusions of mind. and imagining ourselves as working together as souls in incarnation. We use our protective formula, and we use the cross of divinity, brow, heart, left eye, right eye, using this much needed protective formula. We trace light as we go. As a soul, I work in light. And darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. And the many crosses we have made become one group cross of light, cross of divinity, to help provide the much needed protection in this most conflicted and violently energized world we are entering, to do some good. Then we focus the dual light of matter and of lower mind, and we bring them together on the plane of mind. Vital, logical, reasonable thinking. A type of vitalized thinking that throws light on everything. And then we reach into the recognition of the light of the soul, however we normally do that. But it is a real light, and it is provided by our own monad in extension and by the angel of the presence. And we bring the three lights together on the mental plane, the fourth level of the mental plane. And the three become one intense light. And then we say together, followed by the sacred word, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. So we're going to project our beam out onto the astral plane, into that subtle world. We'll visualize the great searchlight turning its light upon this plane where so many people are affected by currents which lead them astray. And we say together, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. And so we get the feeling of our projected beam encountering these emotional currents which very often lead away from the plan and its manifestation. Currents which are very personal and selfish. And we're going to find those currents each time we do this meditation, and do our best to thin them out, dissipate them, banish them, vaporize them, however you want to think about it. And we bring more strength, the strength of the spiritual will, into our beam. We imagine it growing stronger and stronger and stronger. A powerful beam of dissipatory light. And we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And the glamour to be dissipated, as we have discussed, not just the ordinary human selfishness, which is such a part of the normal, unavoidable growth process, but pathological selfishness, which is a disease and leads to further disease and to the inability to see the truth. Pathological selfishness. And now realizing the danger, the obstruction, the prevention, the misdirection, the almost vampirism of pathological selfishness. We utter 3 words of power, and then as we do so, we see our light penetrating these clouds, these veils, these mists that blind people to the realization that they are the victim, in this case, of a very extreme form of selfishness. And so we say, and think accordingly, and visualize accordingly, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of pathological selfishness. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour, pathological selfishness, from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour. So we go on then for 5 minutes with the group beam, finding, penetrating, dissipating this power of pathological selfishness, weakening it till it falls apart and does not affect human beings anymore. So we'll have 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose while we see this work proceeding. And of course, we must make sure that in our own lives, the tendencies towards any of these glamours are weakened, dissipated, eradicated. We must be quite clear of them in order to be effective within the world. So we withdraw our beam and the lights return to their original place. We are shutting off the searchlight of the soul. And we know that this little bit of work has done some good in a stressful time to clarify and end a situation which prevents people from realizing truth. And we'll sound the Om 3 times in recognition of our belief along these lines: mental, emotional, physical, illusion, glamour, Maya, and all under the heading of glamour at this time. Thank you, friends, and from our whole communications team, we wish you the very best, love and many blessings, and we continue to bring to you as much as we can through our different presenters of the Ageless Wisdom. We'll continue with the Ask program. Tomorrow it'll be evening on the Soul of Nations, Destiny of the Nations. We've been working on Russia now, and also...
I'm sorry that I'm intervening, and we are starting. We were supposed to start 5 minutes ago already, the sacred pentagram.
Oh.
So, thank you. Welcome.
I better run into the other room at the other computer and get that going. Okay. It's very true. I overdid it a bit here. Sorry. And then Sunday we'll attracting financial resources. So we'll get this converted as soon as possible and available to you on Makara. And meanwhile, thank you. Thank you all. And now on to another program quickly. All righty. Bye-bye.